Hi, everybody. Judith Unruh here, and I'm really excited about this Zoom call I'm having today because being a small business supporter has always been important to me. But I never really realized how integral a part of our economy small businesses are until this COVID-19 economic situation that we're in. Small businesses are such a vital part of our economy. Their success is essential to our growth and prosperity because they have the unrivaled potential to create jobs and put money back into our communities. That's pretty powerful. So whether you're a small business owner, you work for a small business, or you're a supporter of a small business, I think you're really going to find this Zoom call so great because there's going to be a lot of information shared. When I decided to do this, I thought, who can I reach out to help us better understand what small businesses are going through right now? And I thought of my daughter, Jacqueline Unruh, who works for Order My Gear in Dallas, Texas. And Jacqueline is the leader of people and is also part of the leadership management team there. So she's really at the forefront of day-to-day, minute-to-minute decisions that are being made for this small business in Dallas, Texas. So Jacqueline, thank you so much for being here. And would you tell us a little bit about Order My Gear and what they do?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm honored that you asked me to talk today. So, Order My Gear, we're a small software company based out of Dallas, Texas. Like you said, we provide an e commerce software platform to create pop up stores. And our pop up stores are built to provide customized group gear and apparel to really any groups. We started out in the sports world, but we service corporations and all sorts of groups right now. And as you know, group gatherings prohibited. So we're definitely feeling the impact of COVID-19. We employ about 100 employees here in Dallas, and our company was actually born out of a recession in 2008. So we have what's called a transaction-based revenue model, and we like to think it makes it very sustainable and recession-proof, you might say. But certainly we're finding out through this experience that we're not necessarily pandemic-proof, and I think a lot of folks are in that situation. So we're thinking about the lessons we learned from this and how we change going forward.
That's certainly true. None of us really we're prepared for the situation that we're in now, not only in our personal lives, but in our business lives as well. So I guess my next question is, how are you on a day-to-day basis navigating these uncharted waters as a small business, as it relates to your business plan, as it relates to your day-to-day maybe activities?
Yeah, great question. Since about early March, we've, as a leadership team, defined three guiding principles for all of our decision making. First and foremost is the safety of our employees, the health and the wellness, and the safety of our employees first, then our employees' families, our customers, and sort of the communities around us. The second guiding principle is cash conservation. So cash is king. If you didn't know that before, we all certainly know it now. This is bringing that to light. And then the third principle is, how do we make lemonade out of this situation? Life's given us lemons. So how do we come out of this better on the other side, and think about the things that we're doing going forward?
So expand a little bit more on what specifically you're doing in under both of those categories. Like I know, unfortunately, there's probably had to have been some situations of layoffs with your employees, and then how are you keeping them mentally healthy through this process? And then just segue, Jacqueline, from there into that cash is king comment you made about how that's being
Yeah.
conserved within the company as well.
Sure. So safety first, right? I think at this point, everybody's under shelter at home provisions, and there's restrictions around us going back to the office. But even prior to that, we were certainly prioritizing the safety of our employees. Now we're thinking about the other side of things. When it's time to come back and when these restrictions are lifted, what does that look like? And how do we, potentially change the way we work in our office to give people options about whether they continue to work from home or whether they come into the office. What are our communications best practices? How are we staying connected with our employees? Let's say you have a retail, a brick and mortar store where you don't have the option to continue to work from home. You may want to think about, can you change the flow of customers coming into your store even? Do you have sanitation stations? What sort of things can you do so that your customers and your employees feel comfortable? Do you work in a skeleton crew? Do you have rotations of shifts? Um, and again, for companies like Order My Gear, where maybe you have the option to continue to allow your employees to work from home even after shelter in place regulations are lifted, then do you consider maybe a more socially conscious decision to build a margin in there to say, okay, even after regulations are lifted, we might take 2 to 3 to 4 weeks more and then phase things in as we come back. It's just not going to be a flip of a light switch. And certainly if you have the option, it's helpful to give your employees that flexibility as much as possible. We
Absolutely.
also are thinking a lot, yeah, we're also thinking a lot about mental wellness.
Yes.
So how often are we communicating with our employees? What are we saying to them? Even if what we say is, hey, we don't have all of the answers, but here's as much as we know, and here's what we're looking to find out. I think unfortunately a lot of people are sometimes hesitant to communicate with their people when they don't have the answers. And right now it's an uncertain time for everybody. So I would encourage business owners and employees to just have an open conversation, and more communication is better than less in this time. And so be willing to say, here's what I know, here's what I don't know, and here's what I'm working to find out. And so those are some of the things that we're doing at Order My Gear.
And that's
We're
really
also,
reassuring as well, isn't it, to them, to reassure
yeah,
them?
absolutely. We've found that people, again, they're really understanding of the difficult situation that we're all in. And so transparency and honesty and open communication is going a long way in terms of employee appreciation and actually building a bond through this, right? So we are also doing something we call Wellness Wednesdays. So every Wednesday we do a little lunch and learn, just 30 minutes, and connect with folks and talk about things like our health benefits or mental wellness. What are people doing for maybe meditations or yoga, and just kind of thought share, see what people are doing at home during this time.
I love that. I love that Wellness Wednesdays. And I know that you shared with me that you all have this just really cool dynamic office space there in downtown Dallas. And I know you kind of miss each other. You miss those dynamics between people.
Yeah, certainly. So you've just got to find the dynamics in a different way. The unprecedented times, we're going to come up with new solutions. So again, just try something. Trying something is better than not doing anything. And if your folks don't respond to it, try something else. But it's better to give it a shot and continue to communicate with your folks.
And stay connected.
Absolutely. So the second principle you asked about, cash is king, right? So cash conservation. What I will say is the government has several really good programs that I would encourage people to look into, and they're applicable to a lot of small businesses. So the CARES Act, first and foremost. As of this morning, the $350 billion of funding that they set aside for small business loans has been maxed out. So Congress is currently in discussions in terms of how they're going to replenish those funds. So they aren't accepting any more applications right now. But what I would say is, put on a Google alert, be talking to your tax advisor, stay connected to the news, keep an eye on that, because they fully expect that they're going to replenish those funds. And, those who I've talked to in my network, I understand that they're processing the loan applications really quickly. As you can tell, as they've run out of funds. So they're moving things through as quickly as possible. The CARES Act has a couple other provisions in it that employers can consider. One is a tax deferral program. So employers can defer the Social Security portion of their federal payroll taxes. And those payback requirements extend over the next 2 years, end of 2021 and end of 2022. So some really generous deferrals there, as well as a retention credit. So depending on your situation in terms of how much, maybe your gross revenue has declined and your number of employees, you can receive up to, $5,000 in credit per employee, depending on, again, you kind of got to fall into some of those qualification buckets. So I encourage everybody to do research on those great programs. We also expect the Federal Reserve is going to come out with this Main Street loan program in addition to the small business loans through the CARES Act. So there's a lot there that the government is doing to help. And I know it's a ton of information, but again, lean on your networks and fellow small business owners to find out more about those programs.
Yeah, for sure. And I will link some of that, some of those sites too, Jacqueline, as well, if you can share those with me as well. One other thing that you shared with me earlier was about salary reductions. That falls under that cash can, let's talk reality. I'm not going to cushion anything. And I know that's difficult for any
Yeah.
employee to have to take a salary reduction. But what does that look like and how does that work?
Yeah. Look, the reality is oftentimes most businesses build a budget expecting some sort of growth, whether it's a modest amount of growth or an aggressive amount of growth. We all go into our business plans anticipating and planning for growth. And so it's painful, but necessary to ensure that companies survive through this, that you take some actions internally outside of the programs that the government is offering. So certainly salary reductions is one thing that I'm seeing used pretty broadly across companies. It could be anywhere in the range of 10 to 25%. Some companies are tiering it based on seniority. So, maybe your executives and leadership team take a bigger cut, the rest of your employees take a smaller one. And it can also work in one of two ways. It can be, a straight reduction and then an intent to bring that salary back up to the current level at a later date, or it can be a deferral where you intend to make those employees whole on the salary, but it might just come at a later date. That's one option we're seeing, probably less frequently, but other things I'm seeing companies doing, reduction of benefits, such as 401k matching. Certainly companies are evaluating furloughs and layoffs. But everybody's got to evaluate their own individual situation. And I think one thing that companies can do even before getting to that point is really go through your expenses and make sure that you've done everything you possibly can on discretionary expenses. So all of our expenses, I will say that something really nice we found is that some of our biggest partners are helping us. They realize we're all in this together and they're willing to help us. So we're seeing payment terms extended on certain software tools. We have had refunds on now canceled trade shows and marketing events.
Wow.
So we're seeking rent deferral. I know that some companies are talking to landlords about, again, having payment terms either extended or some sort of assistance from any of your vendors. It doesn't have to be a software tool. Anybody who's a third-party partnership or vendor that you work with, that you remit payment to, call them. The worst answer that you can get is no. And certainly right now, there is no harm in asking and seeing what help you might be able to get there first. And then you can think about some of those tougher decisions in regards to employees. And what is inevitably the largest expense in most businesses is your salary and benefits. So that's where a lot of focus goes.
Thank you. That's good information, Jacqueline. Really, I love that. That's great. Look at every single expense and figure out where you can make a reduction on that output. So no small business wants to be in this situation right now, including Order My Gear. Can you tell me some ways that Order My Gear is taking positive steps to maintain? It's like you have to keep the wheels turning, right? And maybe you have to invent a different way to be successful. So what's Order My Gear doing along that line?
Yeah, that's great. We that's our third guiding principle, right? Is make some lemonade. So we all have lemons here, and we've got to do something with it. So once we've kind of learned our lessons and shored up the clear and present danger, as you might say, how do we set ourselves up for success coming out of this, whenever that is? And I think those that are trying something different and that are willing to think about their business differently, engage their customers in a different way, go to market a little bit differently, those are the companies that are likely to be the most successful coming out of this. So for example, one thing that Order My Gear is doing, some of our clients are now using our pop-up stores to create fundraising stores, to raise funds for local businesses. So it could be, schools, maybe canceled school events, small businesses that they're wanting to support, industries like healthcare, construction, restaurants, fitness groups. But our clients are using, again, those pop-up stores to create customized, focused on fundraising efforts for those small businesses and communities within their own communities. So certainly if anybody out there is looking for help and that sounds interesting to them, I would love for them to reach out to me after this, and I can connect you with somebody at Order My Gear, and we can talk about a fundraising store for your effort.
So tell me, I have two questions. What's a pop-up store? Because I don't know. And
Great.
number two, so you're saying they're ordering t-shirts and they probably have really cute, like some type of saying on them that relates to their business, right? Something kind of trendy and
Yeah.
fun. And I've seen a lot of that, which is great. Is that what that looks like?
Yeah. So a pop-up store is an online platform where a dealer or a promotional products distributor, decorators, brands, apparels, somebody who sells a shirt like this, can create a store with customized gear, and individuals can go in there and place orders, and then those
Mm,
orders can be fulfilled as a group. So OMG, Order My Gear, we make it simple. We streamline that entire process, the point of sale, all the way through fulfillment. And it allows folks to launch those stores for different events throughout the year, different sports seasons, or in this case, tied to fundraising efforts with COVID. And so, yeah, we've seen some pretty funny ones. I have seen like stay at home mom teachers, like t-shirts that mom and dad are the teacher. I've seen ones where it's the logo for the school's sport, and then it's got like a canceled stamp across it. We've seen ones that are local restaurants, and local small businesses, hats and t-shirts and things like that, where they're just putting their logo out there and then again selling it as a fundraising effort. So definitely some creativity that's coming out of it. And this great example of the type of customized gear that you might put together. We do a quarterly store ourselves at Order My Gear.
I love that because it just shows like the strength of a community and the strength of a unit within any place, a school, a business, a restaurant, anything. And that
Mhm.
strength of that community to come together and say, okay, what can we do now to help this small business? What can we all be a part of? Because we want to be a part of that, right? We want them to be successful because their success is our success. And I think
Yeah.
that's great. So, what other steps is Order My Gear taking as far as uh, the sales process? You know, the business part of making that lemonade out of lemons, so to speak, with this
Mhm.
extra time maybe on your hands.
Yeah, I think realistically, a lot of folks have a lot of extra time on their hands. Maybe not those parents who are doing at home, schooling for their kids, and shout out to everybody who and those efforts, because that takes some real effort. But a lot of folks do have to have time on their hands. And so one thing that I like to do is visit that someday maybe project list. I call it that, that project list that you have that's not necessarily urgent, but things you'd like to get to, but the world's not going to crumble if you don't get to them. Well, hey, now's the time to go visit it. So for us at Order My Gear, maybe it's cleaning up data, it's looking at our processes and our workflows, and considering, hey, are there changes we need to make things more efficient so that when the business is back up and running again, we're moving as efficiently as possible. If you're in a brick and mortar store, maybe hey, clean up your storeroom, look at your storage closets. It could be anything really. Set up rules in your Gmail inbox. When your emails start coming in again, you've got organization. You can create prioritized inboxes. It can be something as small as that, but taking this time and this opportunity to clean those things up. You mentioned salespeople, so I actually think our salespeople are more engaged right now, even though those sales aren't necessarily coming to fruition. And I'm sure you're seeing this in the real estate world as well. This is a great time to reach out, clean up your pipeline, do a little pipeline review, solidify relationships, just check in with people. That goes back to that mental wellness.
Yes.
Those folks that you're trying to build a business relationship with, they certainly also appreciate just the human relationship, especially in times like this.
Absolutely. And I've been reaching out to my existing clients as well just as a courtesy to say, how are you doing? Do you just want to talk? I mean, is there anything I can do for you? Some of them are elderly and I can pick something up and leave it at their front door. And then those
Yeah.
people in the pipeline with all their apprehensions. What's happening? What's going on? Real estate is
Mhm.
still considered an essential business. Well, what does that look like now? So,
Mhm.
yeah, things, all of those wheels are kind of moving, but they're moving in a different direction.
Yeah, and look, the exciting thing is you can plan for what things look like when they do open up. And what I would say is expect pent-up demand. No matter what business you're in, no matter what industry you're serving, we all have to expect some really pent-up demand. One great easy example is, let's say you're a hair, there's going to be a massive influx of people who need a haircut after this, or you're a nail salon. How do you modify things to capture that demand efficiently? Again, like maybe you make some adjustments to your processes during this downtime so that you're super efficient when you get back. Are there sales you want to run when things open back up? But how do you make the most out of it and plan for that pent up demand so you can really reap the benefits on the other side? But either way, I think people should be prepared that things don't open up right away. It's going to be a bit of a phasing, and just plan around different scenarios, spend some time doing creative thinking. Lots of people are out taking long walks, walking their dogs. That's a great time to come up with some ideas for things you can try out.
I think when things do start opening up, I mean, just I would ask you personally for Order My Gear. How do you see integrating employees back into your offices there in Dallas? And second question, when is your stay in place order lifted?
Yeah, so right now it's extended through the end of April in Dallas, Texas. And so we're just starting to consider what this is going to look. Order my gear going back to the office. First and foremost, we want to have a safe space where our employees can openly dialogue around this. And we have some benefit there because we can all work remotely. And I'm sensitive to the fact that not every business works that way. Again, where you've got a brick and mortar shop where you have to go in, you're going to have some different challenges that you've got to think about. So we want to make sure we're giving a voice to our employees and thinking about what their considerations are. Folks are going to be anxious and they have every right to be so. And thinking about things like rotation schedules, spacing desks so that there's more distance
Wow.
between folks,
Yeah.
or even just creating that buffer, like I said earlier, between when the regulations are lifted and when we actually start to go back, since we don't actually have to be in the office. But I'd say everything is on the table right now. We're planning around every possible different scenario, and then we'll crystallize those things as the time comes. But it's important to be transparent. And what I found is that when leaders are thinking through multiple scenarios and planning through them and communicating with their employees or their customers around those scenarios, that is what really resonates with people. And the biggest thing here is no one really knows.
Yeah.
There are a lot of smart people who have a lot of different perspectives around how this opens up, when it opens up, what the process looks like. No one really knows. And so it's best to just plan for everything. That's the best thing you can do for yourself, is create a couple different contingency plans. And then as things start to crystallize in the broader community, you'll be ready to go.
Right, exactly. And I know we had talked about as well, there's going to be some fear moving forward when things open up a little bit more, and things might look different. Like when you go to a restaurant, your
Mhm.
waiter may very well have gloves and a mask on. Your hairdresser might have a mask on. We may have a mask on, probably, it
Yeah.
sounds like, for a while
Hmm.
anyway. So I think that the message is to just stay safe, do what you're comfortable with, because it's an individual decision there as far as people going out to the restaurants again. We want to support those small businesses though, and so like you said, maybe the tables will be farther apart, or it's just going to look a little bit different for a while, not forever.
Yeah. Yeah. And the best thing you can do is communicate, right? So, in the absence of communication, people are going to write their own stories. They're going to fill the vacuum. They're going to make assumptions. So, if you're running a business, again, communicate to your employees, communicate to your customers around what you're doing. And certainly, look, if you're a patron of a small business and you're not sure and you want to go back and patronize that place, but you maybe aren't comfortable because there's some unknown, ask. Be willing to reach out to your small businesses. They want your business back. And if they aren't leading the charge in communication, be willing to ask, and we can all help each other get out successfully on the other side.
Exactly. Exactly. It's so important that we all do work together in regard to that. So were there any closing thoughts that you had, Jacqueline? I think we might have covered everything that we talked about covering, and I really appreciate you doing this. I know that small businesses are really being challenged right now, and but we're gonna root for you guys and know that everybody's going to come out on the other side of this smarter and stronger and better than ever.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm happy to share the knowledge that I have with you and your clients and your network. Certainly, again, there's a lot going on in terms of regulation. They're changing by the minute. So I would always say, reference the advisors that you have on your team, go to the IRS website. This is a great jumping off point, but be sure to dig in, over communicate, and be there to support each other, right?
And don't forget that great idea about the fundraiser with Order My Gear, because I love that with
Please.
the t-shirts.
Yeah.
And I'm going
Yeah,
to
bring
link.
it on. We are seeing some really creative things. So feel free to give my email to your network, link them to Order My Gear's website, and we would be thrilled to see some business come through our stores.
Great. Thank you. That's great. Thank you, Jacqueline. And I will
Thank
see you soon,
you.
I'm sure. Have a great rest of
All
the
right.
day and week.
You too.
Bye bye.
Bye.